Coming home, I found Kagome's grandfather in front of the TV.
Sorry, Nico-kun. I couldn't find anything to do. I'm used to working at the restaurant during the day, but now...
It's alright, I understand. I sounded annoyed despite myself. You're holding up just fine.
Once you reach my age, you understand that all material things come and go. But I still feel sorry for the restaurant.
Kagome still hasn't come back from school?
I haven't seen her.
The old man replied hesitantly. He had it good. Wouldn't have noticed even if war broke out. As it often happened at this time of the day, hunger occupied all my thoughts. Maruyuki-san, would you like to have lunch? I don't think Kagome will be upset if we eat without her.
Of course, Nico-kun, of course.
He livened up, stood up with some effort, and walked to the fridge. The old man cooked well, but his dishes missed something special. Love. His rice tasted somehow dusty, or maybe the smell of senility. Senility? I don't know. Confused my olfactory receptors. The restaurant wouldn't have lasted long with a chef like this. That made me respect Kagome and her contribution to the family business even more. Maruyuki-san was eating slowly and looked like a meditating Buddhist monk. I didn't want to interrupt his thoughts, but also couldn't bear to remain silent. Kagome must have been helping a lot at the restaurant, right?
Oh, yes. Kagome-chan takes every job very seriously. When she only just started living with us 3 years ago, Kagome-chan couldn't cook at all. Can you believe it?
Barely, to be honest. Cooking didn't seem to me like some sort of forbidden art that would take a lifetime to master. But coming so far in such a short amount of time, that was worthy of respect. After all, Himitsu had been cooking for as long as I knew her.
She would spend many hours in the kitchen, in the evenings, after work, and in the early morning, until she learned.
That sounds like her.
I realized that she never wanted to spend her entire life over a stove or serving food to tipsy fishermen. But her mother, Yuno-san, left us too early.
What happened to her? His eyes became cloudy, and the old man stared at his plate as if forgetting my presence. Maruyuki-san?
Kagome-chan will tell you herself when the time comes.
I'm assuming it's gotta be something bad then. If I'm gonna make a wild assumption, like she probably took her own life, I'm guessing something along those lines. That when the time comes sounded pretty menacing, but I couldn't just keep prying, right? Thank you, Maruyuki-san. It was delicious. I'll wash the dishes.
Thank you, Nico-kun, for everything.
The old man got back to his TV while I went to my room and grabbed a random book from the shelf. It was Golding's novel, The Spire. Don't know it. I didn't even remember where I'd gotten the book from. I'd read Lord of the Flies once, but didn't get much out of it beyond the message that leaving teenagers without any supervision wasn't a good idea. People unrestrained by external force, be it law, religion, or morals, sooner or later degrade to a primal form. To what extent were Kawashima and Asakura similar with the protagonists of Lord of the Flies? I don't know, haven't read that one either. Unlike Ellie, I doubted anyone expected anything great from them. Consequently, there was no pressure from above, and their wealth removed any pressure from below. Of course, their parents might have provided a moral compass instead, but judging by the girls' behavior, they had failed at that. Maybe Kawashima and Asakura would get their wits about them when they entered adult life, or maybe as they got older, the societal norms from which they would no longer be able to escape could clamp down on their primal instincts. But for the time being, we were all shipwrecked together on the same island, a school for rich kids. And I felt as if they were worshipping a pig's head on a stake, expecting to get pleasures in return, but more importantly, reassurance and security. Evening came, but Kagome still hadn't returned. I began to worry and was pacing from one room to another. Meanwhile, Maruyuki-san was peacefully sleeping in front of the working TV, and didn't seem to be concerned at all about his granddaughter. After it had gotten long dark outside, I made a simple dinner and invited the old man to join me.
When you sleep like this all day, it's hard to fall asleep at night.
Maruyuki-san, do you know where Kagome is? It's not normal for her to be missing like... Is it normal for her to be missing like this the whole day?
I don't know, Nico-kun. Kagome-chan is a big girl already, and I'm too old to be watching her. When Shinji was with us. Right.
I hope he'll be found.
You know, when Shinji was about your age, I was so happy that he enjoyed studying and that he was planning to go into science. But in the end, was it worth it? I always knew Kagome-chan wouldn't want to run the restaurant after my death either. And the whole thing was nothing but trouble. I couldn't just drop it, of course, but why would the young ones need it? And now there's no restaurant anymore.
I remained silent, and Moriyuki-san didn't seem to be expecting any sympathy. We simply ate in silence. If I knew where to find Kagome, that's what I would be doing right now. My god, there are a lot of typos in the later parts of the story. My god. But why would I be worried about her absence in the first place? I already let them stay at my place, and now I was going to allow Kagome to rule my life? Yes. Somebody knocked on the door loudly. There she was. Maybe. I dashed to the entrance so quickly it was like I'd been waiting for this whole day. Where have you been? We were worried. Kagome was standing on the porch. She looked tired. Who's we? I was Moriyuki-san. I'm sure grandfather didn't even notice I wasn't there. To some extent she was correct. So you let me in? I stepped aside, allowing her to pass.
Kagome-chan.
The old man had begun to fall asleep again.
Since you're home, I'm going to sleep. Good night.
He stood up slowly, his joints cracking like he was about to come apart, and slowly dragged himself to the room he shared with Kagome. You know, we have a saying. Don't bring your rules to a stranger's... Oh, whoops, wrong one. You know, we have a saying. Don't bring your rules to a stranger's house. While you live here, please be so kind as to tell me when you'll be back. It's just natural, after all. You don't even have any keys. My granddad is home. Kagome replied angrily and walked to the stove, where the leftovers from dinner were waiting for her in a pot. I see you weren't starving. It's not my stomach you should be worried about. Nico-san, stop being hysterical. I was looking for my father. Fine, but you could have warned me? I guess I could. Kagome sighed and put the lid back over the pot. But didn't think it was necessary. I saw you leaving school with that American. Michael. His name's Michael. Whatever. She was cold and even hostile. Maybe something happened while she was looking for her father, but I'd gotten too fired up that I couldn't stop. Listen, if there's something you aren't happy about, nobody's keeping you here. No, don't be like that, dude. We'll be leaving soon, she said very calmly. And for now, I'm sorry, but I'm very tired and going to sleep too. So what happened? What do you mean? Well, you were looking for your father. Did you find anything? Nothing is something too. Kagome was looking at me attentively, not moving from her place. I seem to remember someone asking for my help just recently. The events of the last few days had pushed the fact that of her father's disappearance somewhere in the back burner. That was the case for me, but what about Kagome? Yes, sorry, I should have warned you. Her mood suddenly softened. I tried to find Nishimoto-san, but to no avail. I'd imagine so. He turned pale as soon as he saw the papers. By the way, the papers... Only now did I remember the documents I had gotten Ichinose-san taken by the KGB. Kagome didn't reply, just lowered her head. I see. Should have left them at my place, I almost said. The overall situation seemed to be grim. Kagome couldn't stand alone against the might of the corporation. Did she realize that? Nico-san, can I go to sleep? Of course, I'm not holding you. In reality, I wanted to ask her about a lot more, but the right questions refused to come to my mind. Good night, then. Good night. Kagome hesitated. Nico-san, what do you want for breakfast? Maybe it's not obvious, but I'm grateful for what you're doing for us. There's no way I can pay you back, but I can at least cook. I don't need anything special. It's not like I expect you to make borscht. I smirked. Borscht? What's that? It's a soup. Includes red beet, cabbage, carrots, meat broth, maybe something else. I don't even know. Borishite. Kagome tried to pronounce it. A difficult word for a Japanese person. She smiled and went to bed. She closed the door to her room, while I long remained in the kitchen, accompanied by the sounds of the TV, thinking about how my life had ended up like this. Could things have gone differently? In other words, could I have just closed the door on Kagome and her grandfather as they smelled of smoke? Leave them on the street and just go on with my life without a second thought? Without a second though? Without a second thought? Forgetting about that unfortunate incident? Yeah, imagine like, Our house burned down. Can we come in? No. Closes, slams the door. Kagome basically left me no choice. Yeah, but why are you acting like it's a bad thing? Huh? Why are you acting like it's a bad thing that Kagome's in your place? What's so bad about that? I'm gonna keep it a buck. I don't think there's anything bad about that, my guy. What the problem is, huh? After all, I did have a lot of free space at home, and she asked for nothing more than that. When a person receives a demand to give up something insignificant to meet social expectations, they usually agree. Kagome wasn't demanding money, she just moved into the room next to mine and began to cook breakfast and occasionally lunch and dinner. To an extent, the situation resembled my relationship with Himitsu, but with her I could always lock the door from the inside, pretend to be sick, or just ignore her. But it's not so easy to ignore someone you live with. And the strangest thing was that it was the loss of an ephemeral sense of control that bothered me more than the fact that Kagome and her grandfather were living with me. Maruyuki-san was, in fact, a lovely old man who wasn't causing me any trouble. As for his granddaughter, I still couldn't decide how I was supposed to feel about Kagome, and how I wanted to. Under different circumstances, we would have graduated in half a year without saying a dozen words to each other, and we would have never seen each other again. Of course, me meeting Ellie was also random to a degree, but at least we had something in common, that being music. In the case of Kagome, we were only connected by the fact that Kobayashi Corporation had caused pain to us both. And as is widely known, feelings born from a stressful situation rarely last long. But then again, feelings? And of course, it could well be due to the rumor that I'd gotten Kagome pregnant. Whether I wanted or not, it made me imagine how my life would pan out if that really happened. Oh, think about a polar bear, huh? Or was it a monkey? I don't know what saying you reference. My head full of albino animals, I went to bed. I dreamed that Kagome was kidnapped and a ransom had been demanded from me. Oh, goddamn. Okay. Of course, in the morning I forgot the details. The only thing I remember was that there was someone else with me at home. A girl. It wasn't really a nightmare, more like a thriller full of suspense than a real nightmare. Fortunately, the ending of the dream was wiped out by the first rays of this autumn sun, and Kagome's fate remained unclear. I opened my eyes and smelled something strange. A familiar scent from the kitchen. No freaking way. I jumped off the bed and ran out of my room. But Himitsu wasn't in the kitchen. Kagome was in charge of the stove. Oh, it's you. I wasn't too upset, just surprised. Nico-san. Kagome grew embarrassed. Oh yeah, he didn't get dressed. What? She made a vague gesture with her head, indicating there was something wrong with me. I looked down and realized I was standing in the middle of the kitchen, just in my underwear. Ah, yeah, sorry.
I knew a Russian many years ago, before the war. He used to cook a great borscht with those garlic buns.
Bombushki, I suggested.
Yes, probably.
We sat at the kitchen table eating borscht for breakfast. For me, this choice of dishes was becoming a regular occurrence. Of course, the Kagome soup was different from Himitsu's, and it was at most only a cousin to a normal borscht. But the taste was recognizable, and good too. But where did you find the ingredients? Well, I won't argue. Red beet wasn't easy to find, but the rest can be found in any grocery store. I decided not to dwell on the fact that she had to have woken up extremely early to buy all that, and that she'd probably spent the last of her money on it. How much did you spend on all that? I'll pay you back. I won't say no to that. Kagome smiled. I was about to go to my room to grab my wallet when someone knocked on the door. Or more precisely, banged on it like they were trying to knock it down. I immediately realized there was no common guest and looked at Kagome. But she seemed just as scared and perplexed as I was. But I couldn't just sit it out. I had opened the door. I summoned all the courage I had and walked to the hall. The impatient guest turned out to be Kagamaru. Come along. Kobayashi Dono wishes to speak with you. His look killed any thoughts I had of arguing with him, but I still asked. You have a few minutes at least? No. Put on your shoes and let's go. Nico-san? I turned around and saw Kagome, then looked at Kagamaru again. Apparently I wasn't in the least surprised by the fact that there was an unfamiliar girl at my place early in the morning. See you at school. I told her quickly, put on my shoes and followed Kagemaru. What's this about? Kobayashi Dono will tell you everything. He grit his teeth. Oh. The drive seemed unbearably long to me, and wasn't just because of the weekday traffic. Unsurprisingly, Kagome kept silent, and I was afraid to start a conversation. It was clear that something had happened. It was also clear that I probably wasn't being brought into Kobayashi Corporation's offices in the morning to be killed. Too many witnesses for that. I tried to accept it and just patiently wait for the meeting with Kobayashi Jun, but keeping calm turned out to be no easy task. My hands were shaking, I felt cramped and choky on the back seat, as if I were suffocating. Finally, Kagome stopped the car right at the main entrance. A few minutes later, I was standing in the gigantic office of the head of the corporation.
Nikolai, we've seen too much of each other of late. I cannot say I'm happy about it.
He looked focused and serious.
Unfortunately, I haven't invited you for a pleasant talk this time either. Elizabeth has been kidnapped,
he said and looked at me, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. Kidnapped? Was all I managed to force out.
Do you know anything about this?
Of course, the old man wasn't in a joking mood, but still sounded like he was reporting a decrease in quarterly profit at a board assembly, rather than the kidnapping of his very own granddaughter. No, Kobayashi-san, I don't, I swear.
It'd be strange to hear something different from you.
But it's the truth.
Elizabeth didn't return home yesterday, and in the morning her so-called kidnappers left a note in the mailbox saying she'd been kidnapped.
He squinted, crossed his fingers in front of his face, and continued.
Naturally, they asked us not to inform the police and to wait for further instructions.
I didn't know what to do. Didn't know what Kobayashi Jun expected of me. Didn't know whether I was better off talking or remaining silent. Who could have done that?
Like any serious businessman, I have plenty of competitors. But kidnapping children is against the implied code of honor. If we use every possible means to achieve our objectives, the collateral damage would be far too high for everyone. I understand that, and so do the others. That's why I'm almost positive it was someone outside that circle.
The world of politics, big business, and crime was so far beyond me that I had nothing to say.
That's why, Nikolai, I started to suspect people Elizabeth has met recently.
I was at home the whole day yesterday, and I have witnesses to confirm it.
That's good.
The old man leaned back in his armchair. Kobayashi-sama, you don't think it's me, right? Why would I kidnap Ellie-san?
I'm not a detective or forensic psychiatrist. Besides, I have no desire to get inside someone else's head, especially that of an impulsive teenager.
His words made me uncomfortable, like a t-shirt label scratching against my back. But it didn't seem like he really suspected me. Otherwise, Kagome probably would have been asking the questions. Maybe, contrary to what he was saying, Kobayashi Jun wanted to test me to see if I knew something Ellie was hiding from him. Kobayashi-sama, you should understand that I don't know Ellie-san that well. Sure, she invited me to play in her band, but my circumstances have changed and...
It was quite reckless of you to deny such a generous offer.
Maybe, but for now I have no time for music. You see, a classmate of mine turned to me for help.
The restaurant burned down. Is that correct?
Obviously, he knew without me having to tell him. Yes, that's right. So, yesterday, the whole day... Except where had Kagome been until late at night? The whole day I was at home. I have witnesses. I still paused but forced myself to continue as if nothing had happened.
How convenient.
You don't believe me?
Nikolai, it's not about whether I believe you or not. What matters is whether Elizabeth is safe.
Well, yeah, who would argue with that?
Can you remember anything else that might be important?
Thought about it. Kawashima's and Asakura's arrogant faces came to mind. A revolt? The old man clearly knew about Kagome's restaurant being burnt to the ground. What did he know about our conflict with Kawashima's gang? Prudently decided to remain silent. No, Kobayashi-san. Nothing for now.
But if you remember something...
He sighed and stood up.
I'll bid you goodbye for today. But this conversation isn't over yet.
Kagome brought me to the first floor and pushed me out of the lift. You can find the way out. I passed the turnstile, sunk deep in thought, and bumped right into a European-looking man in a strict business suit. Excuse me, I muttered and headed for the exit of the Kobayashi Corporation building. But I didn't go home. Instead, I rushed straight to school. Kagome's busy evenings, her grudge against Ellie. Did I really suspect her of kidnapping Kobayashi Jun's granddaughter? You better fucking not. It didn't seem like Kagome had the means to pull something like that off, but did she have the motivation? It's not easy to kidnap even the most average person, let alone the heir to the Kobayashi Corporation. But Kagome's behavior of late suddenly began to seem just way too strange to me. I have a feeling that dude he bumped into on the way out fucking planted something on him. Irina was another suspect. That was my first guess. She already shown interest in my relationship with Ellie, and more importantly, she was just the kind of person from outside that circle Kobayashi Jun had been talking about. Also, we know with Ichinose, she's kidnapped people before. That's something that her and her group does. It was clear that the old man knew many secrets KGB was interested in. And quite importantly, Irina wasn't burdened by the infamous Japanese code of honor. But I couldn't interrogate her, and I could talk to Kagome. I didn't want to storm into the classroom in the middle of the lesson, so I had to wait for a break. Finally, the bell rang, and as soon as the teacher walked out, I ran over to Kagome. Fortunately, she got to school today. Let's have a talk. Nico-san, is everything alright? Her surprise was quite appropriate, but something about it seemed feigned to me. We're about to find out. I grabbed Kagome by the hand and walked her to the hallway. Ellie's missing. She's been kidnapped. What? Not here. She hissed at me and walked towards the stairs. Indeed, on the roof we could talk without any witnesses. Cold autumn wind wailed through the ventilation grills, making the place far less cozy than it had been just a couple weeks ago. Ellie's missing. She's been kidnapped, I repeated. Do you know anything about it? No. Kagome's face didn't even twitch. I looked at her closely, trying to detect any signs that my words weren't news for her. But Kagome remained impenetrable to me. Are you sure? Nico-san, are you trying to suggest I kidnapped Kobayashi? You have your reasons. And how would I do that? She smirked and walked towards the railing. Well, you were wandering around God knows where the last couple of days. I've been looking for my father, she suddenly exclaimed angrily. Yes, but for so long? I responded in a less confident tone. Nico-san, I don't have to report where I go to you. And even if I wanted to, don't you think there are other people who have issues with Kobayashi? Like who, for instance? For instance, Asakura wasn't at school yesterday. Her skipping school a single day isn't grounds for an accusation. Yet you're accusing me because I've allegedly been wandering around. She was probably right about that. I'd let my emotions get the better of me. I'm not accusing you. I've just had a very unpleasant conversation with Kobayashi Jun, and he suspects me. You, Nico-san? Kagome scoffed nastily. Me, yes. But if you're here, you must not be the primary suspect. What else did he tell you? That they got a note, which the kidnappers demanded he didn't go to the police and waited further instructions. Kidnappers? So there are several of them. God, I don't know. I went to the bench and sat down. Interesting. Interesting what? First you try to help me, then my restaurant mysteriously burns down, and now Kobayashi gets kidnapped. If I were you, I'd suspect me too. So Nico-san, I don't blame you. But think about it. Did I storm into Kobayashi's house in the middle of the day, kill all the guards, tie her up, and carry her away? Or do I have the Yakuza for accomplices? Or, sorry, that's the limits of my imagination. Maybe you can come up with something more believable, Nico-san. I bit my lip and turned away. Yes, it was hard to link Kagome to the kidnapping. Suspicion alone wasn't enough. So what about Asakura, Nico-san? She would have easily been able to lure Kobayashi somewhere deserted, and then Asakura, Kawashima, and their gang did have significantly more resources. But why would they do that? Perhaps they didn't quite get along with Kobayashi. They've been getting along before. Meeting you has changed a lot, Nico-san. You have a bad influence on women. She smiled and I grew embarrassed. If they're capable of arson, they might be capable of this too. I still wasn't sure that Kawashima and her friends were to blame for the burning down Kagome's restaurant, but decided not to say that out loud. But events really were happening at a breakneck speed, that's for sure. I wanted to tell Kobayashi Jun about our problems with them, but I couldn't make up my mind. Well, you should have, she said without a hint of anger. Well, yeah, but then I'd have to tell them about you and Ellie not getting along. Kagome thought about that. Then maybe you were right not to do it after all. You don't seem to be afraid of Kobayashi Jun at all. No more than the circumstances demand. Yeah, well, if she'd been in my shoes in that office, she'd be singing a different tune. Why are you smiling? Nothing. Just thinking that you two have something in common. Really? Kagome was genuinely surprised. Real stubborn and willing to climb over other people to get to your goal. I don't know who you think I am. It was a joke, calm down. In any case, being compared to a person like that is flattering. You're welcome. Alright, Nico-san, you have a good reason to skip class today, but I need to go. Can I expect you for lunch? Of course. Kagome smiled mysteriously and ran away. So, somewhat unfortunately, I had to admit that she had persuaded me of her innocence. She should have to persuade you of her innocence. I believe her. I really couldn't imagine a way Kagome could have kidnapped Ellie alone, and it was at the very minimum strange to imagine that she had accomplices. What? Accomplices, given that she had great trouble making even regular friends. So what was the forecast for tomorrow? If things kept escalating like this, I'd have to prepare for giant robots to invade Tokyo sometime this weekend. God, man, that'd be awful. You know, if giant robots, bruh, might as well throw in an alien invasion in there, why not? Big aliens, big robots, why not? Maybe, Himitsu gets turned into a fucking robot of some kind. I mean, that'd be wild,